First story, Operation Nightmare. Sergeant John P. McHale received orders from his commander to lead an investigative mission to the village of Kalinov, a small locality in Eastern Europe that had mysteriously lost all communication with the outside world. His team, consisting of Corporal Jessica M. Lynch, Private Pat Tillman, Medic Lori Piastua, and Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy, was prepared for the operation, equipped with standard gear and ready for any contingency. During the journey to Kalinov, the tension was palpable. The soldiers knew something was wrong. The atmosphere grew more oppressive as they approached the village, and as they crossed the dense, sinister forest surrounding it, they were enveloped by a thick mist and an eerie silence that seemed to absorb all sound. When they finally emerged from the forest, they found the village covered in an even denser fog, and its inhabitants stood frozen in the streets, immobile and with vacant stares, as if they were living statues. The team split up to explore the area. Jessica tried, unsuccessfully, to re-establish communication with Central Command. Meanwhile, Pat Tillman noticed shadows moving among the trees and at the edges of his peripheral vision, increasing the tension among the soldiers. Each one felt a chill down their spine, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. Lori Piastua, exploring an abandoned house, found an old diary. The diary belonged to a Nazi officer who described rituals performed during World War II to summon a demon named Morozko. The detailed and horrifying descriptions of the rituals included human sacrifices and macabre ceremonies meant to guarantee Nazi victory, but ended up sealing the village's fate. Lori shuddered as she read the words, feeling as if the very essence of evil was embedded in the pages. Simultaneously, Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy discovered an altar in a hidden basement of one of the houses. The altar was covered with strange symbols and melted candles, and was stained with dried blood. Murphy, a man of logic and science, felt unsettled realizing he was facing something beyond his understanding. He suspected that this altar had been used in the rituals described in the diary. When the group reconvened to discuss their findings, they were attacked by invisible forces that seemed to manipulate the environment around them. Objects began to move on their own, doors slammed violently, and a constant sense of dread engulfed the soldiers. Jessica finally managed to pick up a fragmented radio transmission, where Central Command mentioned something about malevolent energy detected in the area. With the situation worsening, McHale decided they had to try to undo the ritual. Using the information from the diary, they prepared to perform a counter-ritual at the altar to try to seal the demon Morozko back. During the process, the demon manifested its presence, attacking the soldiers with horrific visions and a supernatural force that tried to prevent the ritual. The visions were disturbing: dead soldiers, faces disfigured by the horrors of war, and buried memories surfacing, mixed with Morozko's whispers, promising pain and destruction. Pat Tillman, using his sniper skills, protected the group from physical apparitions of the demon, which materialized as grotesque shadows and spectral figures. While Murphy and Piastua worked together to complete the steps of the counter-ritual, Jessica maintained communication with Central Command, receiving additional instructions and alerting them to the advancing situation. The ritual was complex and required precision. Each mistake was punished with a new manifestation of the demon. Murphy, despite his initial skepticism, recited ancient invocations with fervent intensity, while Piastua manipulated sacred artifacts, feeling the weight of history and responsibility in her hands. The air around them seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and every second felt like a step closer to the abyss. After an intense and terrifying struggle, the group finally managed to complete the ritual, and the fog enveloping Kalinov began to dissipate. The villagers slowly returned to normal, though confused and disoriented. The demon Morozko was sealed back, and the team breathed a sigh of relief, though marked by the terrifying experiences. Each soldier knew they would never be the same. Back at the base, Sergeant McHale and his team reported the incident, which was classified as highly confidential. They were decorated for their bravery but bore the psychological scars of the confrontation with the supernatural. The silence among them now was filled with unspoken meanings and a tacit understanding of the dark realities they faced. The village of Kalinov, though seemingly normal, remained a place of mystery and fear, with the presence of the demon always lurking in the shadows of history. For Mikhail and his team, the mission was not just a battle against invisible forces but a journey into the heart of darkness, where each faced not only the supernatural evil but also their own inner demons. Like and subscribe if you dare. Bell, get ready for the next nightmare. Second story, Welcome to the Jungle. An elite squad, led by Captain Jack Harper, was sent to the dense jungles of South America after receiving reports of inexplicable disappearances of civilians and military personnel. The team included experienced soldiers, Sergeant Elena Martinez, Corporal David Brooks, Private Sarah Collins, and tech specialist James Jimmy Moore. As they navigated the dense vegetation, they discovered the wreckage of a downed helicopter and the remains of their fellow soldiers. The bodies were mutilated beyond recognition, and the area around them was eerily silent. They advanced cautiously, aware that something was hunting them. As they moved deeper into the jungle, signs of the Reaper's presence became more evident: claw marks on trees, blood trails, and scattered bones. Jimmy detected a strange signal on the radar, something moving too fast to be human. The group stayed on high alert, moving in a tight formation to protect themselves. Suddenly, the monster attacked, emerging from the shadows with razor-sharp claws and fierce jaws. It was a massive creature with dark, glistening skin, red eyes, and an aura of pure terror. In a frenzy of terror in combat, the Reaper quickly killed Sarah and David, its superhuman abilities overwhelming the soldiers. The jungle echoed with screams of despair and the sound of flesh being torn apart. Elena managed to injure the creature with a grenade but was severely wounded in the process. The explosion threw the creature back, but it wasn't enough to kill it. Jack and Jimmy, seizing the opportunity, took refuge in a nearby cave, trying to formulate a plan while the creature recovered from its wounds. Inside the cave, Jack and Jimmy analyzed the Reaper's movement patterns. They discovered that the creature followed heat and sound but had a moment of weakness while feeding. They decided to use this to their advantage. Jimmy prepared traps with explosives while Jack created a sound diversion with improvised devices. The plan was dangerous, but it was their only chance. They lured the Reaper to an open field using a drone to emit battle sounds. The monster, attracted by the noise, followed the drone into the trap. Explosives detonated, injuring the creature but not killing it. The final battle was about to begin. Wounded but still deadly, the Reaper advanced on Jack and Jimmy. Jimmy, in an act of bravery, sacrificed himself to distract the monster, giving Jack time to position himself. Jimmy ran in the opposite direction, shouting and firing his weapon to attract the Reaper. The creature, instinctively, followed the sound and heat, giving Jack the precious seconds he needed. Using the terrain and available resources, Jack led the Reaper to an area where they had prepared a larger trap. While the creature fed on Jimmy's body, Jack activated a set of strategically placed explosives around it. The explosion was colossal, shaking the jungle and setting the perimeter on fire. The Reaper, gravely wounded, still tried to attack Jack, but the captain, using an improvised spear made of sharp metal reinforced with explosives, pierced the monster's chest. In a final act of desperation, the Reaper tried to crush Jack, but the spear's final explosion sealed its fate. The creature fell, defeated, while Jack, exhausted and wounded, emerged victorious. He looked around, the jungle ablaze, and felt the weight of victory mixed with the loss of his comrades. Rescued days later, Jack Harper was decorated for his bravery and cunning. But he knew the jungle still held many dark secrets. The sacrifice of his comrades and the memory of the battle against the Reaper would stay with him forever, a constant reminder of the horrors they faced in the depths of the jungle. Third story, The Vengeful Spirit of the Abandoned Soldier. The elite Squad Bravo, comprised of the best soldiers in the U.S. Army, was on a dangerous mission in a war-torn region of Eastern Europe. Led by Captain Nathan Miller, the team included Lieutenant Sarah Green, Sergeant James Jimmy Reynolds, Corporal Alex Turner, and Private Chris Walker. Their mission was straightforward: infiltrate enemy territory, rescue a prisoner of war, and return to base. During the infiltration, the group was ambushed by enemy forces. In the chaos, Chris Walker was gravely injured. His comrades tried to help him, but the enemy closed in rapidly, and the situation grew desperate. With gunfire intensifying and no way out in sight, Nathan made a painful decision. He ordered the team to abandon Chris to save their own lives. Reluctantly, Sarah, Jimmy, and Alex followed orders, leaving Chris behind, screaming for help as the enemy closed in on him. The squad managed to escape, but the weight of their decision haunted them. Days passed, and the mission was deemed a success, but guilt gnawed at each team member. Nathan, Sarah, Jimmy, and Alex tried to move on, but the memory of Chris lingered in their minds. A few weeks after the mission, strange occurrences began. Jimmy was the first to notice. In his tent, he heard whispers at night, calling his name. At first, he thought it was a prank by his fellow soldiers, but the whispers continued, followed by visions of Chris, bloody and accusatory. Jimmy began losing sleep, his mind gradually unraveling. He saw Chris everywhere, in the dark corners of rooms, reflected in mirrors, even among the jungle foliage. Each apparition seemed more real, each detail of Chris's face more horrifically vivid. One night, the whispers turned into deafening screams. Jimmy awoke in his bed, drenched in sweat, with Chris's figure hovering over him, dead eyes fixed on his. In a frenzy of panic and madness, Jimmy grabbed his gun and fired at the vision, but the sound of the shot echoed endlessly in his tormented mind. The next morning, he was found dead in his tent, a victim of a self-inflicted gunshot. Jimmy's death profoundly shook the remaining team members. Sarah began experiencing similar visions. She saw Chris in mirrors, in window reflections, always staring at her with empty, pain-filled eyes. At night, she felt a cold, dark presence beside her bed. Once, she woke to the sound of soft, repetitive knocking on her door. Hesitant, she got up to open it and found the corridor empty. When she turned back, Chris's figure was sitting at the edge of her bed, unmoving, repeating the words, "Why did you leave me?" Desperate, Sarah tried to drown the visions with alcohol and medication, but nothing worked. One particularly terrifying night, the visions intensified. Chris appeared in her room, slowly advancing, repeating the accusatory words. The pressure became unbearable, and Sarah, seeing no way out, jumped from the third-floor window, her mind unable to withstand the torture any longer. Alex, the most skeptical of the group, began experiencing paranormal events. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed, and Chris's figure followed him everywhere. One night, while reviewing documents in his room, all the lights suddenly went out. In the darkness, he heard slow, dragging footsteps approaching. He turned on a flashlight and saw Chris, his face disfigured and filled with hatred. The flashlight slipped from his hand, and Alex, paralyzed by fear, watched Chris's figure disappear only to reappear closer, until he felt the icy chill of the spirit inches from his face. Each day, Chris's presence grew more oppressive, until Alex, consumed by fear and guilt, overdosed on medication, succumbing to darkness. His last words were an incoherent murmur about forgiveness and redemption. Nathan, the last remaining member of the squad, tried to rationalize the events but knew he was close to his own breakdown. He began hearing footsteps behind him, feeling cold touches on his shoulder, and seeing Chris's figure in his dreams, turning them into nightmarish hellscapes. One night, Nathan was awakened by a loud bang in his room. There stood Chris, covered in blood and repeating, "Why did you leave me?" Nathan felt the constant pressure of an invisible presence, hearing distorted laughter and agonizing screams only he could hear. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Chris's disfigured face, his empty eyes filled with suffering and vengeance. Chris's spirit gave him no peace, and Nathan began losing his grip on reality. In a state of utter desperation and unable to bear the guilt, Nathan wrote a letter explaining everything before joining his comrades, ending his life with a gunshot to the head. The letter, found beside his body, detailed the horrors the squad had faced and Chris Walker's relentless haunting. The Bravo squad was disbanded, and their deaths served as a grim reminder of the terrible choices war can force upon people, leaving scars that may never heal. Chris's spirit, seeking justice and revenge, had destroyed those who abandoned him, bringing dark and inexorable vengeance, haunting them until the complete destruction of their souls.